Subcommittee meeting to order. Again, we're going to start right where we.
Yes, sir. You ready to go?
Yeah, man.
Okay, we're called to order. I'll just go ahead and start on our packet. We're still, I think we're on number one, part B. So we'll look at the east. I'll go ahead and share my screen. So here is the east area that we, in the current 2021 comp plan. And I'll go to the next slide. So you can see economic opportunity, gateway business, industrial, and outside there is a little bit of institutional. We look at this right here, just looking at the aerial map. I calculate about 2,850 acres, and that is about just a little under 4.5 square miles. And you can see the utility service area here. 4.5 square miles is pretty much the size of a small town. So just kind of give you an idea. I think the village one is somewhere around half that, so a little over two-ish square miles, just if that helps you visualize it a little better. So 4.5 square miles. Here are the areas that we had looked at before and had designated economic opportunity. And I do have another close-in map we can look at if there's any questions. I mean, you can see a couple, or at least this one and the one here and here are outside, say the boundary map as far as the growth area. So this area here, and I have a little better map I can zoom in on, is a discussion about potential residential or / mixed use area. And just to show you where this is, Page Road. And I believe, yeah, here we go. Page Road. This parcel right here was economic opportunity. So with Carter Galley, it's everything. Now, you can see here that as far as the larger part, there are some, I guess, larger parcels in here. Whether or not, don't make any assumption that anyone's trying to develop these parcels or whatnot. But just to me, just sort of seems like maybe the only logical area if you're going to add something non-economic opportunity. Going back to the map here, we've got quite a bit of gateway business, obviously, that we would expect along this corridor. So, not particularly saying any change to that, but is to look at if this particular area, Carter Galley Road back east, that would be something on the map that, again, would be a slight expansion. You can see outside the boundaries. But that's the only area that I kind of looked at and saw that there be any sort of logical sense that could be maybe a mixed use or a residential area. Again, understanding there you can see here there are quite a few parcels. Whether that could be assembled, we don't know. But and I think one of the other conversations, whether or not we're looking at the growth areas, and again, I think it's important to keep in mind these are long term. This is not putting it on the map just as it was shown. This shows a lot of commercial areas that obviously haven't developed. So I don't think that necessarily this is a 2 or 3 year horizon. We could be looking at 10, 15, 20-year horizon, but once it's on the map, that is something that at one point you would expect potentially to develop. So I guess questions here is are the first one is the future land use designations, are those still generally appropriate? Would expanding the growth area be reasonable? Is acceptable as shown? And of course, the mixed use designation. Is that something that would, have a conversation about that? And I do have, here's economic, well, and here's economic part. Here's that parcel right there. And this is Carter Gallery, kind of where my mouse is going right there. So here's the one economic development. So the area that I was just pointing out would be right in this area. So any conversations on those questions or?
Yeah, it'd be all right, Lee, if we would put up a little more detailed map that shows what surrounds it. Amenable.
Yep.
So on this map, I mean, the area that Lucas is talking about here, there's the overlay of what he had out of what was handed out to us and what he just talked about. So that's the picture out of the handout. So as you can see, that's the same area. You take this down, and then this everything outlined in red is exactly what's in the area he's talking about. I think he has 175. I make it 165, but it's roughly the area we're talking about. And so things to be noted about it. Priority conservation here. I mean, the economic priority is in gold. Everything that's existing gateway business here is all purple. Straight up A10 land is not shown with any color beyond the border designation here. So that's all is just the pictures of the area of the A10, and then you can see what the surrounds this. Is existing R2 in the main, which is all this kind of reddish area in here. So one thing to note about this, so this whole area here that's in red but is outside of that yellow area, that yellow border there is the service district border. So that up there's no service to that area at this point in time. It's kind of outside that picture. So inside the picture, you've got these little set of parcels right in here within the service district.
There's still no services, they're just in the service district, correct?
These are in the service district. These are not.
There are no services.
But there's no actual service in it.
No services.
No,
Just in the service district.
this is what the county has as their layer for the service. And so these are within what they've already got. And of course, all this down here, as you pointed out, this is all gateway existing at the moment. And then the priority economic priority areas are there. So that's kind of the picture we're talking about. And so
The UDD that we're talking about going to would be supported in a gateway business area.
Well, I think that's one of the conversations that sort of need to have is, in my feeling, if, it's kind of a separate conversation, but if we go to just a single master plan district, would that, first question I have, I'm saying part of the district is that it would just be something that would be in a growth area. Or I think I said at least half of it would be in a growth area. That's what I put in. So if it's spilled over, that would potentially be okay. But I guess that's the first question is, we want to say it has to all be in a growth area, or as I recommended or suggested, half. Then the other question is do you stick to, if you want to master plan something and it's in gateway business, does that mean it just needs to all be master plan commercial? Could that also include some elements of residential? So that was kind of something we can talk about. We're going to skip to that now, talk about that now, and then come back to this. But that's fine. But that's sort of the kind of pressing question I would like to put to y'all is, if you accept the concept, one, should it all or part, most, half of it be in the growth area? If you accept that as well, the next part is, maybe the third part is, what can that UDD look like? Does it have to, like, again, that's what people say, does it have to stick to strictly commercial? If you're in the village, you can do mixed use. So that's kind of if you're a residential, we don't have any residential designated here, but if you're a residential, could you introduce some commercial? So
Just part of the answer to Jamie's question. If it's within the growth area and it's gateway business, then you could do UDD the way the proposed language that you provided.
Right.
But if it was gateway business and it was rezoned to commerce center, then you can't do residential because that's come up in some of the public hearings, something like that. That's right.
Well, I think, yeah, right now, CC allows no housing.
No residential.
No, it's really not CC. CC doesn't allow housing. Gateway business does not allow housing.
Oh, it doesn't?
It was, when the comprehensive plan was done, and all gateway business, one of the designations, originally, housing was in there. Because if you take your book and start flipping through the pictures of what it was supposed to look like, it had housing mixed in there. The planning commission recommended to the board that housing would be removed from gateway business, and the board voted 3-2 to remove it from.
So it was, but it's not currently. So
It started out that way, but it hasn't been for a while.
That's not where my question was coming from, because that was, when we talk about extending the growth area, what you call it and what's allowed there is going to be part of the conversation.
Right.
And if you're extending gateway business, I've only heard positive things. If you're wanting to extend it to include housing, I've got nothing but negative phone calls and emails. And I'm like,
on a related note, that's a significant change if gateway business doesn't allow residential currently, and then we write UDD standards that allow residential and gateway business because we've
you've
already,
opened up that whole area.
yeah, all the purple.
All the purple.
That's worthy of discussion.
I mean, it's fine to, again, it's fine to say, yeah, we like the UDD, but you still need to adhere to the underlying future land use. If you're going to master plan a commercial development in gateway business, that's great. But if you're going to bring in a mixed use, not so good.
So you would say that UDDs could handle some of the other various or sundries of all of the classifications, village center, PD, all of those, but then excluded, if you want to use the word purple, and all the purple. You would allow UDDs in there, you would, I guess, could you call a UDD all commercial?
Yeah, I mean, you could do it, you could allow it, but you could only master plan for a commercial development.
Can I give an
Would that-
example on this?
Yeah.
Just to give you an idea of how this could work. Because this is not an uncommon thing in my world, that service boundary. So suspend opinions for a minute, and I'm just going to give you an example. So let's just say that all of this was subject to a zoning case, and we were going down the road of a UDD. UDD supported true mixed use, which would be commercial, industrial, residential, and any combination. So because we've got economic opportunity here for priority, what happens is you try to develop, if you're going to do good planning, and Ligon can tell me if I'm wrong in this, but if you're going to do good planning, you try to develop these density zones. And from the node, the density decreases as you work your way up. Okay? So this could kind of develop as a node this way, if you were to consider it, where with your gateway business, with having Carter Galliard here in 60, you've got great accessibility for this front zone, right in here, that I could see a developer being interested in looking at it from a commercial perspective. Commercial being the broad-based, not fast food, high turnover, I mean just the broad-based commercial. I could also see, because you've got Old Powhatan Estates here that are small lots, that then you could have a transition to some increased density residential lots, not 5 acres, not 10 acres, maybe 1 acre to mimic what's over here, which is done very well over the years.
Are they 1 acre, those lots?
They are, for the most part. 1 and 2.
Actually, the rezoning case that backed up to Greenberry,
That's what I was talking
That
about.
was
That
the
already
whole-
happened.
that just took place, and they were trying to get those lots to be in conformity that Mr. Baldwin was trying to get right there.
Yeah, these.
It was debate about whether it were 2 acre or 5 acre average. I think it was 5 acre average, 2 acre minimum.
So then what happens is you're kind of facing compatibility here in lot sizes, okay? And keep in mind, all part of common zoning. Then you go up here and you look at what you have on top. You got 2 acre and larger, 5 acre, maybe you got 10 acre in there. So some larger lots. You got a little bit of preservation, really nothing going on in here from a preservation perspective except this one finger. But you have the utility service line. So if you were to look at some higher, the way that the transect would want to develop is then you could look at some moderate density kind of sitting in here. Maybe it is 2 acre. I'm not trying to pin it and pigeonhole it. But then what happens is you come outside the service area and you get into that in your 5 or 10 acre so that you can have comfortable lot sizes. You can have septic and well, and they can go on their way. You're not going to fight the service district line and try to increase capacities anywhere, deal with any of that. The other thing that comes into play as well is that I didn't start with, because I only mentioned the two from a commercial perspective. Whether we all like it or not, this is the continuation of a parallel road to 60. This is going to happen, and it's inevitable for Page Road to be improved. You've got a residential outlet for people that are educated to then, for all of this residential, to be able to use that and not be on 60. But from a UDD perspective, this is kind of like a dream come true parcel in how you could present it if the developer, and it would be up to the developer board, but if the developer was to look at it from a compatibility perspective with the surroundings, and how would I develop this so that it actually would fit properly. It may be that there's not a strong desire here for the commercial, to be honest. Long term, there just may not be a market other than this corner. You never know. But from a zoning perspective, to plan for it, that's one way you could look at it in the broader brush to see how the residential could fit in, but also how the UDD could come into play. Because then once you create that combination, then you would get into, for what the UDD is proposing, would be something like a pattern book to impose architectural standards and compatibility across the board. You would then impose defined setbacks and buffers. So that means that the green finger that comes through there, if, I don't know exactly what it is. So if it's high environmental priority once it's done in the field and delineated, then maybe that warrants an enhanced buffer. Maybe that warrants the residential lot staying completely out of it. If it actually is an anomaly and it's not really an environmentally sensitive area that's worth, keep in mind, I'm trying to use high level words here, that's not worth preserving, then it could be absorbed into lots. I get any green on the map has probably got something to it. I'm not trying to challenge that. I'm just trying to show you what the options could be here of how this could develop and how it could be a comprehensive project that spans multiple uses and fits mixed use. I hope I didn't steal thunder, but I was just.
There's so many things there, but the 4 lots that are outside of the service district,
Yep.
you're suggesting that those should be included in UDD or service district? Or
Okay, yeah, so
both? What are you saying?
to make sure I'm clear, so the hypothesis here is if that was all aggregated, somebody was a magician and got all of those pieces to agree that they were going to be part of a common zoning. Okay, that's the first assumption.
That's a hard one.
That's a hard one.
No,
But then what I
understand
was
that.
saying was, no to being in the service district, do not adjust the service district line. It's outside of it, keep it out of it. That's one. Two is, since it's outside of the service district, let's, from my world, I would say let's make that lot appropriate. We're on the eastern end of the county, we're surrounded by 1 and 2 acre lots. It's gotta have well and septic. I would look at probably 2 acre just to see how it fits. Maybe 2 with some 5. But the key there would be along Page Road to preserve the transition appropriately. So to the north on Page Road, you've got larger lots. So let's do what's the right thing there and let's buffer that Page Road with the larger lots to be respectful of that development that's already there.
So does everybody agree with that, that those 4 parcels that Living identified would stay outside the service district, or is there anyone that thinks we should be expanding the service district? 'Cause I don't know the logistics of that.
I think that,
Go ahead.
Second, why is that service district line where it is? Whose decision was that and what is it based on?
Well, there we go. So let's start with that.
Let me make sure.
I mean, the drainage area,
I have the same question, Doug.
I wasn't heavily involved in the drawing of that many years ago. I don't know if it was parcel lines or how it was drawn that way.
It must have been.
It's definitely partial lots.
It had to be supervisor action. Place it.
Yeah, I would not be inclined.
It was, but may have been.
no, well, I mean, I'm just questioning why is it, the natural drainage boundary runs along Page Road, everything in Page Road flows to Route 6.
That's right.
Roger.
It could be a service area if you want it to be. I'm saying you.
I guess my question, are we talking utility service? Is that what we mean? We're not.
Yes, that's what, right.
Growth area map, we've shown economic priority outside the growth area. I mean,
That's a separate question.
right. So to make sure, okay, so making sure
We're talking about whether those would be outside the service district, and the reason I wanted to have that conversation is because, I'm gonna go up here too. Ligon wrote in his write-up on UDD that 50% of it could be outside the service district. So in this example, if I own this parcel and I convince this guy to work with me, I could do those 2 parcels as UDD because 50% of it is outside the service district. So one of my markups today when I went through it in detail was 80%. So for me, if I owned this parcel and I wanted to do that parcel, I would essentially need to aggregate some additional parcels. So that's why I think these are related things. How far outside the service district do we want to allow UDD? Because right now it says 50%, and I was like, 80% cross out, 90% cross out. Like, why are we doing UDD outside the service district? Because there's not going to be water and sewer capacity. That's the definition of the service district. So we certainly, it didn't seem like we'd want 50% outside the service district with no guarantee it could be sewerage.
But I think I've made the point though, is that whether it's in or out of the service district, so service district and utility serviceability is not in the same category as UDD because that, I mean, those are apples and oranges. You can do a development that has all of it outside of the service district for what it's worth, and it can be a UDD. And don't get me wrong.
I don't think so, not that I'm looking at it.
Wait, I'm not talking about what's written here. I'm talking about the larger planning principle, okay? I'm just saying, from a planning perspective, plan development, a UDD, whatever phrase you want to put onto it, it's not tied to the utility serviceability on the higher plane.
It says designated growth area.
Again, I'm still talking about, I'm not trying to talk specifically about what's written here because we haven't even got to it.
Okay,
I'm
well,
talking about planning principles.
that's fine. I get what you're saying. I'm just saying that there's, unless this is just going to be another one of those massive decisions that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're
gonna go
outside the service district, I mean, you're already, I mean, you're gonna have to have, larger lots to accommodate. Well, that's just,
There's a limited number of places.
Right.
I can
So,
see where it would come into play.
and again, I'm using growth boundary, in my terminology.
Thank you.
That's the way I was looking at it.
Designated growth areas.
If you don't have the utilities, if you were to step it outside the growth area, then you don't have utilities, then, you probably range it.
So there's another question for the group. Is it tied to the designated growth area, or as Chris said, is it a theoretical maximum for the whole county that you could do a UDD?
Yeah, I'm tying it to the growth area. That was my intent.
And that's fine. Like I said, I was trying to give you an example of how a planned development could happen where it had the transition of densities
Yeah,
and it had the
I don't
change
have
of
any
service
questions about
area.
what you said either.
So-
Unless others did. I think it was clear.
Yeah, I don't really,
So if somebody ran services to 4274, right?
Yep,
And the line stopped at the edge of 4274, let's just paint that. If a developer wanted to run the services into the parcel behind it, he would not be able to do that, is that correct? Is what we're saying currently now. Currently.
Well, that's what I'm questioning is, what is the basis for why is that service district line where it is?
And in that specific location, Page Road is the ridge line, as Doug said, and that developer already is having to extend sewer. So, I mean, it would not be the hardest parcel to extend sewer. I'm not sure what water pressure is there, but you would potentially have that. That's why I asked the question whether we're talking about extending the service district in this case, because I wouldn't think typically we'd want to include 4 parcels outside the service district for this.
I mean, presumably, when this was put in there, there had been a study as to where this area might reasonably go. And part and parcel of that study, and certainly the decision that the board had to make, had to be what the liability that the board was signing on to for the provision of services throughout an area like this. Because it's a costly thing if you get involved in it. So when there's already a lot of pain and suffering on exactly how much money is being spent in this whole utility precedent,
that's why I'm laughing, because the Browns could quite possibly have just said, we do not want to be a part of the service.
Right. They could have.
I mean,
But that being said, I mean, there's a monetary picture here and a budgetary consequence to this thing, which may very well have underlying a fair amount of where that service district and ultimately got it wrong. I'm not knowing the specific.
I never remember any of that conversation taking
Well,
place.
somebody drew that there. It's not an accident that they looked at that and has those.
It's
shapes.
probably utility studies by the end
Yeah,
of it.
I mean,
It was done,
it's capacity limited.
it was capacity limited, but I don't know if it got into this granular as, say, well, this is the capacity, so this is where we'll draw the lines. I don't know if that ever took place.
Well, it was not happening. It was not anywhere in the picture, right, in the 2010 comp plan. You came out with 2016, Billy?
On the board, when I was on the planning commission.
Yeah, before that.
Yeah, so it would have been in.
It got in there sometime after.
I don't remember so far.
Early 2010s.
I don't know when I'm, too long.
Close to that, but okay, so.
But I mean, we know those 4 parcels, even though they're outside the service district, could be sewer. And they could certainly be watered even if you had to do a booster station. So if you're talking in general terms about expanding the service district for water and sewer, that's a different issue. If you're talking about these 4 parcels, we all know enough to know that that's not a major obstacle for development. And that's, I think, what Doug is trying to point out.
See, I'm
I
not,
think
I
you
haven't
did.
heard yet, so I haven't heard this discussion yet. What exactly is the pressing need to expand housing into that gateway business area beyond what you already have? I mean, I do know that last week we all agreed to an expansion of what would presumably all be UBD, of some 249 to 250 to 275 acres over there, an expansion of the courthouse village, right? That's a lot of land.
If I'm mapped it, it's a little over 250 acres.
Yes, so we'd already, and that's on the, we've got a map of that, we know exactly what that acreage is, and that's kind of, yeah.
And that's prime for UDD. It's walkable. I think this, we had this discussion too under the economic priority discussion about this area. So I think we've sort of already dipped our toe into all these issues about walkability, roadway connectivity.
And let me throw this out there. So when you're talking about the extension of that parallel road to Route 60 and running south of the existing R2 up there and above what's currently the gateway business off of Compatibility, I mean, it's unclear to me why, once that's built, that's going to have a factor, why that doesn't automatically give you walkability, first level service, business opportunities along there to serve the neighborhood up there, to right down in there, with other people traveling the parallel road, or to have that much larger development there to the east of that. I mean, to say that those are not under that kind of a development scenario, that road work unreasonably thought of as gateway business prospects, it's not included here, but that's the case. And I don't, right now you've got a little chunk of stuff there that's gateway business, and there's clearly a nod been given to it as a place for commercial growth and located within what is the planned service district. So to eliminate any significant amount of that or put it over in a place where you're just going to let the market decide whether or not this just turns into housing seems to me to kind of go in the opposite direction of probably what the vote intent would have been to put it in there, which would have been that we need to be a little more heavily on promoting commercial development here and less so on housing. And that's how come the thing got out of that. That's how housing got out of that gateway business to start with. I mean, it makes sense. It's just unclear to me what the argument here is, or the need is, to put additional residential fairly close to Route 60 here, that is going to add more traffic onto the highway in that area, puts a little more burden on our services, takes away some of the chunk of what we've allotted for gateway business. I haven't heard the argument. I understand the village, I get that. And that's a big change there that we're talking about, a lot of acres. But I don't see where those kind of cases are made for this. So I don't know, help me here if I'm missing the picture.
Yeah, and all I would say is, back to the charge, we were charged with to look at opportunities, to provide diversity in housing. And everything I've read, that I've tried to do as much research on my own on it, there has a direct relationship between jobs and housing. Okay? If you don't believe it, look what Henrico just came out and said. We've got to have the housing to support the growth of the businesses. It's a balance, Bob. And this board has sent us direction that feel like they were unbalanced. Now, is that an explosion of the county? I don't see it. I don't want that. But I think you've got to do some things to allow different size house lots, whatever it may be, that address the workforce. I think Don mentioned it one time, the jobs at these light manufacturing facilities are not going to be paying $100,000 and up. They're going to be paying, in the 50 or whatever it may be for those workers. And providing housing for them is something that's going to need it. Because if they can't get the workforce, they'll go somewhere else.
I haven't heard anything here, Billy, that tells us that we're going to get affordable housing in this area.
Well, I didn't say affordable. You keep bringing the word up affordable.
Well, you're talking about housing diversity, so people with different stages of the workforce, and you're talking about
aging
Speaking about
population.
$50,000, you're talking about a $50,000 salary. I don't know, why would you be talking about, unless you were talking about somehow affordability in the diversity
I
equation?
didn't say affordable. I didn't say the word
What
affordable
is
at all.
it? Why are you
If
talking
you
about?
read the charge that we were given, Bob, you haven't embraced this charge at all from the start of this meeting we've had. You haven't embraced it. Not one time have you been even open to discuss it.
It says
Did
attainable.
we just,
It says
did we
attainable.
just,
Pardon?
It says attainable, not affordable.
It does not say it before.
Yeah, it says attainable.
Attainable.
We read that at the last one.
I mean, I don't know, Billy, did we just approve 250 acres over there?
I did.
The expansion of the village?
I did.
The rest, it was a 5-1, it was a 5-1 vote.
It was.
So, and I understand the.
So you're saying, so you're now saying that's all that that's the only map work we should do? There shouldn't be anything else done anywhere else in the county?
It's unclear to me why we need to promote additional residential to go on what you're already talking about there and what the current capability on undeveloped lots, as far as that goes in the county, is concerned. But I mean, I'm not, you know, if you're looking for diversity of housing, it's not clear to me that you're gonna get it in this particular development here. And by diversity of housing, you're in the same way you talk about somebody who's got a $50,000 salary, can't afford, or even maybe a joint income, can't afford to buy a home. I don't see here you've got a solution here, or this is even, a solution was even a part of this discussion.
If you don't have a plan for it, you won't ever get a solution.
Well, I don't,
At least just ignore it like we've done all these years. Do you
So you
think
wanna-
the solution?
you want to take an action without a plan toward a solution that you said is in the.
All you're allowing for is certain things. The plan is a plan. He's talking about UDDs and things like that. What will be in all of those? But if we haven't planned for any other type of housing, Bob, let me ask you this. Did the Aaron Hills, did it have difficulty selling?
What was the price for it?
Let's forget about the price. Did the density turn anybody off? It sold. Did down at 7-Eleven, all of that sell? Well, it sold. It rented. So there is a need, in my eyes, in your eyes, and I respect you. In your eyes, you don't think there is a need? That's okay.
Well, you're talking about something totally different. You're asking me, is there a market? Oh, you bet there is. I would deny that for a moment. That's why, I mean, what's the average price of a house in going for there?
And Aaron, and where?
Mid fours.
It started in the fours.
Started in the mid. So
I'm not talking about affordability.
I got some ideas come up later about affordability, but.
Attainability, I don't know, we did have Susan in here. He's talking about attainability here.
Right.
The Board of Supervisors basically authorized, encouraged, if you will, Susan and that whole group to put that study together. So I mean, I think this is part of the equation. Attainability is in the thing.
Right.
I don't see this as, you know, just to make a bunch of houses. Look, any houses you build in this county, people are gonna come in here and get it if it's at market or a little below market, but it hasn't been going below market, it's been so on. That's just because there's a gigantic expansion of demand coming out of Henrico County, and even now out of Goodsland County, and in Chesterfield County. You're not gonna be trouble selling your house. I mean, you're gonna be trouble, you know, you're not gonna have trouble making a residential development fly. The only problem you're gonna have making that fly is if the county and the people in the county don't really want it. And they don't want that expansion. And if the people in the county don't want that expansion, and it's not directly called for by the Board of Supervisors, and they're willing to stand up and say, we just want more housing, period. If they're not willing to say that, then I don't know, I'm sorry, I haven't heard an argument here that gets this job, takes us to this
Yeah,
conclusion.
well, Bob, don't you feel totally different about the commercial aspect of it because, you know, you suggested many parcels that we should put in the commercial. Okay.
I do,
All
that's
of them, there's a
correct.
lot of them, okay. Tell me if my thinking is wrong, but I believe if you travel up and down Route 60 today, there are endless parcels for sale commercially. Right now, there's a much greater shortage for housing availability than it is for commercial. There's plenty of parcels commercial people can build on today. Whether we talk about it or not, they're there. Why aren't they there? Apparently, there's not a huge demand on the commercial side. The other question is, why? And you heard Roxanne say, one of the reasons rooftop density is a big issue. And I'm not promoting that we rezone the county to residential every parcel that comes across, but we need to look at these service districts. What is the real demand for that? We've got lots of parcels that you've suggested for commercial use, and I doubt that they can get into this service area without a lot of serious pumping and tremendous infrastructure. The Adcock property, for example, then it was covered up with a solar farm. We got in there, and I'm like, what the hell are we thinking? It's impossible, but there's bukus of commercial properties today. But how do we figure out where we can put residential and what is acceptable? And when I say acceptable, I mean, what does the market need, not what the complainers don't want. What complainers are saying is absolutely meaningless to me. I mean, what people's rights that I'm concerned about are these property owners. For example, leaving out those 3 or 4 parcels, in my opinion, is discriminatory.
So,
I mean, there's a service district that could be corrected by 2 strokes of a pen and a vote. And they should be included. And I agree wholly with what Chris said, is you develop this area, Route 60 is the area, commercial, you get all of the commercial you can on Route 60, but there's a limit how far off 60 you can go. Then you start your transition into other types of developments, residential and maybe even some apartments, as bad as that word is. And I think he's got a good point. As you approach these other residential areas, it needs to be softened so it is more acceptable. But I'll bet you $100 against a donut, whatever zoning case comes up, the public is going to run up and oppose it. I don't care what it is, whether it's residential, commercial, data centers or what. People are opposed to change.
well, Doug, there's several things here. All right, number one, the last thing I'm gonna do is a citizen working group suggest.
Speak a little louder.
The last thing I'm going to
Bob,
propose,
do you mind turning the share screen, turn that off for now, kind of having a conversation?
so,
Just stop sharing.
But there's a balance between residential and commercial, and finding that balance is very, very difficult. But there's a huge demand for residential growth in the county.
Well, there's been substantial residential growth, and the numbers which I've seen show that every home that's been developed in the county is costing the county taxpayers close to $2,000 per year in revenue and services. And in addition to that, the board's budget includes things that are going to add services, such as the community center, which resulted in, I believe, a 17% tax increase. So it's pretty obvious that all of the residential development in the county is leading to the increased taxes. So the idea that additional residential is going to help things out is just completely backwards.
it's 180
The idea
degrees.
behind the economic priority was to create jobs for the people that live in Palatine. So if your idea is we're going to do residential housing in a higher density because it's going to attract more people, that means more traffic on Route 60 just to try to get businesses on those EP parcels. So I'm not sure that tracks out with everybody in how we should envision the next update to the comprehensive plan. I think the goal of the math we did for economic priority was to create the right split between residential and business and to try to push some of the tax burden onto businesses. But unfortunately, if the people don't live in Powhatan that work at these businesses, then that's going to be harder to develop those economic priority parcels. Roxanne seemed to have a handle on it. She seemed to think there was a good strategy to create businesses.
I think you're right, she did say that, but she is perplexed. And she did share with us that you've got to have housing. They're not going to come, if they got to drive out of Chesterfield to get here, guess what? They'll drive to the business in Chesterfield because it'll save them wear and tear on their
Well,
vehicles.
I had conversations with Billy. I mean, I had conversations with Roxanne myself, Billy, and I got no indication out of her. Like I got the contrary information, that there's a big need for rooftops to generate commercial growth. I mean, I get that. I think you got the horse before, you got the cart before the horse. And look, to say that there is a scarcity of housing, right, let's understand here, right, the market works. There's no scarcity. Is there a higher price? Yes. But you think that, you think in this climate, and with this surrounding demand, you think if you put a big increase in houses in this market, that you would drive the price down? You think that's what's gonna happen? That's not what's gonna happen. What's gonna happen is, you're gonna just get more demand and people coming in from these other counties to live and buy these houses up, and they'll go at the exact same prices or higher than they are in these other surrounding counties. It's not gonna change anything. There's too much demand. The amount of demand here is far beyond what Powhatan could possibly generate. And so the market's just gonna take it where it is. That's not scarcity, that's supply and demand. They just cross at a higher price is what happens. Okay, so, and that's exactly what's going to continue to take place here. I don't, to me, there is no way that I'm going to sit here and say I'm a member of this committee that's called a citizens working group and be willing to say that I am not interested in hearing what the citizens have to say, or I'm not going to take into account a bunch of people that don't like this particular kind of development, and especially housing development. If I hear that plenty, so by God, I'm going to be insensitive to it. And I think it would be very presumptuous of me to say that what they have to say on these points don't matter. I think they matter a great deal. And I see the understanding of diversity housing. I understand there's attainable housing issues in the county. I'm not offering you an easy solution. Susan's not offering you an easy solution. The small court kind of thing that Ligon is talking about, these smaller sized houses, if you could build into the order, if you could build into the agreements on these houses, on these properties, that the prices couldn't rise, or that the size of them had to be kept a certain, maybe. I haven't heard much discussion about this, right? But if you don't have the mechanism, they're just going to be built. What's going to be built there, they're going to be built in a manner that gets the most profit. And that's not any knock on the people who are trying to build it. What do you expect them to do? That's what they're trying to do that. They're tired to do that. That's what their livelihood is based on. So it's fine. But they're not the only players in this game.
They are. And so you've had enough. Okay, I've heard enough. All right?
I'm not done, but go ahead.
And I'm sure you're not, but here's what I'm gonna say. You run in a certain circle, I run in a circle, he runs in a circle. I have heard the same thing you've heard from people. I've also heard from people who say there is a need for some different type of housing for aging population, or for my kids when they graduate from college, or when I go through a divorce and I have to find a place to move out of the county because I can't afford anything in the county. So I've heard both sides, okay? I'm not gonna listen to one side or the other. I'm gonna try to do what's best, and I've been asked to do by the Board of Supervisors, and that was address the housing needs, okay? That's not my personal opinion, whether we need big lots. I live on a big lot. I love my big lot. I don't want a small lot, not right now. Maybe when I'm about 78 or 90, whatever the age is, I will take one, but at this point I won't. But you run in a circle and you are hearing them, and congratulations that you do, and that you will represent them. But I'm gonna roll my sleeves up and do what I was asked to do here, okay? And that's not saying I'm not supporting, or for one thing, but I am gonna work to do what I was asked. If I didn't wanna do that, I would have stayed home, going to my son's baseball game, grandson's baseball game tonight, probably like Jamie's missing his. I'm gonna try to do what the board asked us to do, okay?
I'm working hard, Billy, and I'm working as hard as everybody else on this committee.
Nobody has said
Yeah,
you're not, Bob. I've worked with you many years. But you have an opinion and I have an opinion. He has an opinion, and it's not one way or the other. And Mr. Bradbury had one, and he brings a lot to the table. I respect it.
Just tell me, Billy, I want you to know how the discussion that we just had regarding that Page Road area, how that exactly meets this housing diversity thing. And you cited various stages of life. You cited things that, you know, we're gonna be sensitive to. I just don't hear any of that in the proposal that we've got here. I don't hear anything in here.
We're not
the
at,
ability to build
the
houses.
plan's not, we're not charged with putting a plan together that creates all those. We're charged with what he's asked us to do. And do we want to expand any of these areas to support any other additional housing, whether it be UDDs, we haven't had, or what? That's what we've been asked to do.
Yeah, I think I kind of go back to maybe some of the data we talked about, the typical, you know, Powhatan house that sold, you know, I'm looking at the median price. You know, we're probably looking between $500,000-$700,000, 4 to 10 acres. I think the board just wants, you know, not really being asked to come up with a beautiful plan that necessarily provides a house that, you know, everybody in the county can afford, but something different as an option. So I guess that's kind of how I look at it, and that's why I sort of piggyback to UDD that, you know, that could potentially, just use the site, you know, this Page Road site that we're talking about as, I think Chris said, something that's done commercial sensitivity to the nearby. That's sort of, I really don't get any more granular than that at this point. You know, and again, look, just when I came and looked at the maps when I started a year and a half ago, just okay, I'm going to try to, you know, I knew Powhatan, but when I look at the maps, you know, my sort of first impression was just they seem like they're really geared up for commercial development. You know, maybe not as much residential. So, you know, I kind of maybe even echo what Mr. Bradbury said. You know, if someone came in and wanted to do a UD for a large commercial development, I'm not sure it would get a lot of different reaction than maybe if it was, you know, a residential. You know, you'd probably see a lot of the same pushback. So, from my perspective, from the planning and, you know, going to the hearings, it's probably, whether it's residential or commercial, it's something that's large and different, you're probably going to hear a lot of the same. But again, we're still just talking about, look, we're still talking about 6 square miles of the county that really has some development potential, whether it's commercial or mixed use or residential. It's a really small footprint.
You've got some kind of, I mean, I'm looking right here in the executive summary on the housing residential. The main substantive statement here is, our goal is to develop housing that is accessible by a wider socioeconomic cross-section of the community of all ages, while also addressing the housing needs of the county staff, the teachers, and those employed by businesses located within the county. Okay, so that's descriptive of something, of the kind of housing diversity that they think needs to be addressed. I'm just wondering, is there a vision, okay, that you have for how this housing could be done, or how it should be directed, what recommendations are to be that would help to, you know, achieve some of this? That's what I'm interested in. Because if I don't hear any of that, I don't see the reasoning here. I do see the negatives. You know what I'm saying? I'm not opposed to housing just to be opposed to housing. I'm opposed to it if it hasn't got a good purpose.
Yeah, I mean, denser housing would be in the growth area. That's sort of a given. You know, you would then, inside that growth area, through something like the UDD, you would give an option to try, you know, different product than say what we're, you know, with the typical Powhatan sort of house as I described.
You mean like apartments you talk about?
Well, but potentially. I mean, I don't necessarily know apartments, but it could be, you know, use the Patterson Road as an example. I mean, those were smaller. Those are probably going to be in the, you know, sub 400,000, which today I guess passes as being somewhat affordable. You know, I really, you know, I don't know what the final proposal will look like. I don't really have a vision that somebody will come in but I think if you give the tool, here's the areas, here's our utilities, this is generally what we would like to see. Ultimately, you know, Plan Commission, the board, citizens input will look at any proposal and, and that'll be the deciding factor. But I still kind of go back to, these are very limited areas in these growth areas. Utility is very limited. If you're worried about this area, Powhatan looking like Chesterfield, I don't think you have to worry. Because we don't have the utilities, the capacity. But are there areas within these growth areas that could be suitable for a mix of things, including housing? I think it's a fair question, and I think moving forward, here I'm just trying to get some clarity. Like I said, I'm not looking to put together this is exactly what it will look like, but big picture in this area, like again, just looking at the map, this was the only area, you kind of go back to what I said at the beginning, just seemed logical where you could have some sort of mixed use.
I think the intent when it was rewritten was to quit the lack of better word when you use sprawl or the gobbling up all the land with these 5-acre average 2-acre minimum and focus some density along the Route 60 corridor to try to meet housing needs with first continuing to gobble up all the land that it eventually being gobbled up. And so that was the original intent of the 2010 major rewrite, was to try to focus to some type of housing along the 60 corridor in areas.
So with
It
the
was not
village,
housing, it was just the growth, it would be what,
Well, the growth was in housing, Bob. We were eating all the land up. And so it was focusing housing back into service areas, because the sewer system doesn't pay for itself, and housing will be the one that houses will use more water and sewer than any business we have in the county at this point.
so for the village, wasn't that the goal of what we covered at the last meeting? I mean, that's sort of, we didn't specifically say it's UDD but it's going to be either a village designation on the future land use map or some other designation.
One of those.
That's going to make it clear that it's mixed use. And the reason I think that worked for most of us was because we considered it walkable. We looked at it being a mile from the courthouse. So we decided it was walkable and it wasn't creating direct traffic impacts on Route 60. I mean, there'll certainly be potential for traffic for anyone who doesn't live and work in the village. Ideally, the little bit of economic priority and some of the governmental jobs are going to create a place for people that, live and work in the village. Like that would be a fully functional community if that's what happens, but we can't dictate price points and things like that. At least that's what we discussed, that we couldn't recommend that to the board, that we should be dictating like attainable housing, senior living, like all those things are just up to the free market to determine, unless we come up with something creative there. So I still think would be great if we could come up with a way to make it more aligned with the strategic vision, but I think everybody agreed the village is a good spot for that. So the question today is there a place in the eastern part of the county for it? So, where we're talking about, I'm not sure it's as good as infill development at Holly Hills. I've had my eye on that, and let me tell you why. We want to downsize because we're officially seniors, just barely. But we want to be on single-story housing. We want to be on a smaller lot. So we went out and looked, and the new construction we looked at was way overpriced for what you get. It was poor quality construction. So we're looking at older houses that have been kept up with, that have new roof, new HVAC, but maybe need a little bit of work, like bathrooms or kitchens that my wife might like. So to me, Holly Hills is a great place for studying infill development and maybe investment in some houses that are a lower price point, because I just went through this experience. I looked at 25 houses 2 weeks ago. And at the end of that, and 3 days of looking, it was like, we really can't afford what we want in a brand new house because we didn't see the quality kitchen cabinets and the flooring and the things that we wanted. But in the older houses, we could see fixing them up. So to me, if we're talking about something that works in the eastern part of the county, I would love to see us prioritize, it doesn't have to be us as a working group, but somebody taking a look at Holly Hills. There's the 1 acre lots in the subdivision Chris pointed out. I mean, I don't know what the price points are, but infill development, things where we can create better housing options are kind of there already. And taking away from gateway business, unless there's a reason to do it, we've already done that with economic priority. So I'm not hearing a reason why we should do another development area for housing.
Hey, Jay, I'm trying to ask a question a while ago.
Yes.
This continuous debate that goes with the cost of housing, has houses ever carried themselves financially in the tax roll, in tax revenue? Has housing ever supported itself?
I would hesitate to say no. I don't think it has. I think there is in the realty business, there is push to say that it does, and, a vacant piece of land only brings in X amount of dollars, whereas when you put improvements on it, it brings in X times more.
Right.
The difference is, and what my part of the equation has always been, is that that completely ignores the expense side.
Mm-hmm.
And so what ends up happening is a vacant piece of land basically costs the county nothing.
Right.
If nothing was there, there is no service to be provided, there is nothing, no cost. So then you take the housing side and take the list of things that go with that, with public service and education and, fire, emergency service, all those things, and take everything else out of the equation, right? And just do the math, you end up with a negative number. And again, that's using that median house. I mean, when you go into certain subdivisions in the county where they have no education requirement, they're fixed housing. I mean, you can't have kids in certain age restricted places. You take the education component out, that was definitely one of the largest. Even when you plug back in EMS and fire, they typically do pay for themselves if you just look at them individually. But if you just take that median across the whole group of parcels that we have, they don't pay for themselves.
Well, looking backward, probably 75 years ago, the housing market probably was closer to paying for itself.
Right. It's gotten
I
further.
remember Bobby Carter made a statement. He says one of the saving graces of the county was all of this land that's owned by Bear Island, and huge forestries. Like I say, they may have thousands of acres sitting there. They're paying land use tax.
Right.
But it's no cost to the county.
There's no cost.
So the question now becomes, all right, well, housing has never really carried itself, but now why? And you just stated some of it, because there's the increase in police protection, fire protection, basic services, and the schools in particular. I don't think the increase in housing has caused the school budgets to go where it has gone. That's caused by the government itself.
Well, and also, as the price of housing's gone up, so has any of the state, what you call the ADM or whatever they get, which is funding back because it's based upon
Oh,
income,
the composite index.
has gone down, so the county has had to come up with more money. Years ago,
Well, that's what he's talking about, and that the government, the government has created,
Unfunded mandate.
unfunded mandates, whatever you want to call them, but the composite index is the state's way of fairly distributing money. And so because our income, our median income of the people that live here, the type and the housing market that exists and the price of the housing, the state says we don't need as much money as a Chesterfield and that's a fact. Like, this is the part that people kind of glaze over when the school board is doing what I would consider trying to be transparent about it, but people don't see the way that formula works out. That we actually spend less money per student is what they like to try and publicize and let everybody see. But we actually spend more of the county's money per student than every other locality around us, because the state gives all of those localities more money than it gives Powhatan. And it's our own fault. It's the people that live here, the jobs that they have, the incomes that they have. Those are the things that go into that government-created composite index, and that's what Doug said.
So there's a takeaway here now. So if we had more poor people move into the county,
Yes.
get more state money.
Yes, sir.
I mean, so down that road you could go, but I'm not advocating that at all.
so we did do years ago, Jamie's right, it probably has done, we did a break-even analysis just to try to figure, and of course, you have to remember, that break-even analysis still had proffers coming.
Right.
So it was a
Those were
break-even
based
analysis
on-
based upon proffers that were tied at one point to, your CIP, you calculated it out, and at one point, they were like $16,000 a lot additionally, and then we floated down to, $8,600, and it went down from there. Once we started pulling stuff out, the government said you couldn't add this one, you couldn't add that. So those were break-evens, and
Those are as close as you were ever getting with a mathematical formula to housing paying for itself.
or breaking even.
Breaking even.
I mean, where we're at, the plan favors the commercial tax base, because that's where we started, and that's where we broke out as a working group, subcommittee. The question is, how far do we want to go to meet the, board's recommendations or goals with the housing? The village, to me, was a clear opportunity to expand marketability, and I thought we did a pretty good job of, doing it in a way where it doesn't create impacts along Route 60. To me, to do anything else, the only way to make it work is if people live and work in the same place, and I haven't figured out how this does that. If my office was at Spring Ranch and I could take a golf cart to work, right? That would be 30 less miles on the roads every single day of the week, right? And that would be a great solution for us, because we have how many thousands of people that commute into town for a job? So if you could bring their jobs here, then suddenly we don't have a traffic problem on Route 60. But we don't have that solution in hand. So to me, it's do a measured approach. It's create opportunities for alternative housing, because that's part of the board's visioning and strategic plan, but don't suggest things that don't work as well, because I think that'll take away from the opportunities that do work well. It's kind of like having a zoning code with 80 permitted uses. If you do that, you may not get the 50 or 60 that are really good, like a senior living center, those kind of things that we all know we want. But when there's 50 other choices, the developer's going to pick the one that's the most advantageous financially, that they can make the most money. We really want this kind of development within the village to be. So for me, on the eastern part of the county, I would love to see infill development. I think we've already tackled ADUs and family subdivisions. We've put all those solutions forward as a working group. They just need to be fleshed out and presented in a way where it is a handful of good solutions. This is not going to move the needle too far one way or the other, so definitely open to continuing to try to figure out, why this is uniquely helpful. But I don't think we should get hung up on it, because we've put a pretty good.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to, so we're looking at kind of back to these 175 acres. We've got maybe half of that now is shown as future gateway business. Essentially what I had proposed, and again, I think Chris probably had the idea that, the vision as far as kind of, as I saw it, potentially, again, I did look at Holly Hills. My only question about Holly Hills is we had a couple economic priority, that the larger parcels that were near economic community. So those, the two biggest opportunities maybe around Holly Hills to me were already chosen for economic opportunity. So, I think the question that I just proposed to the group, and to maybe go on to the next thing, is this 175 acres, is it, I just kind of go back to the question, is it something that could be potentially in the plan shown as a future mixed use? Not, by no means trying to get down to the level saying it's going to be X number of houses versus X number of commercial. I would expect for it to be, again, along 60. And that's kind of the point of the UD, is to give that flexibility. But I just see it as fairly straightforward and simple. If it's something you don't want to add as a group, then I think
Personally,
just ask.
I really appreciate the work that you have put into this. Put a lot of work into it and a lot of thought. And the good thing coming from you, you're not on either side of the fence. I think you've been around enough to know that there is a very delicate balance between the two I appreciate what you've done, and I wholly support that, what you presented tonight, and I supported what you had last week also. And I personally think that the mixed-use concept is the right road to take. So,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bradley, is that in a motion?
no, I wouldn't most, that's just a babbling statement.
We've had enough of those tonight. Mr. Chairman, may I make a motion so we can? Sure. Okay. Again, as I've said last week when I was here, I support what Liggett has brought to us. I think he's put a lot of work into it, and he's the planning guy. He's the one with the degrees. He's the one. I'm not a planner. I don't know if anybody else in their other career was a planner or art. You know, I know the industries you two work in, but I am in support of what he's suggesting, you know, and put in front of us tonight. So. And I'll make that in form of a motion.
That's a motion.
Second.
Motion and second, so discussion on the motion.
Yeah, I would think, looking closer at it, you know, a smaller version, taking some of the gateway business off of there. I don't know where the overlap is with gateway business, I mean, without understanding it better, I mean, it's not something that I would support. I think the focus should be on the village.
Comments? Comments? So the only comments that I'll have, and it was where I started my first question was I wanted to understand, because I'm not completely opposed to expanding the area to include those other lots. I am completely opposed to it being strictly residential. If there is some kind of, and I know you're saying you don't want to get into those details, but that's what would convince me to support it, is that there is some kind of mixed use that's proposed, because that's what I've heard. If you're looking at making an expansion of residential into that area, then I can't support it. And I mean, that is what it is.
So it was a recommendation to say that we're going to decide what a UDD is and what we're going to allow in Gateway? Is that part of that? I didn't see that as part of my motion, because I, for one, have concerns as his that what are the specificities of a UDD, and then what amount of housing would you even allow, if you're going to allow housing in Gateway, what percentage would that be in all those? So is your recommendation that we expand the 175 and then we allow it to be UDDs and then we allow Gateway business to have housing? That's not.
I think on this parcel, again, that's why the UDD is, it's kind of, if you want it to be mixed, I think what I hear from Jamie's, yeah, master plan's great. Being a mix of commercial residential is fine, but you really truly want to see it as a mix. You know, you're not saying that, you know, 10% commercial, the rest of it's residential is fine. So I would probably, I would maybe say a balanced mix of residential and commercial. I think that kind of gets you to that, I think, balance. And we're not saying that it's got to be 50-50, but I think balance would not be if someone came in with 5 acres or 10 acres of commercial development, and the rest of it was I don't think that's balanced. But I'd probably hesitate to put a percentage. But I think balance would mean exactly that, to me, balanced.
I think what Chris said a while ago, sort of, to me, is the target. I think we should be hitting on about 60 corridor should be commercial. And then you fell your way back through the residence and, you know,
Get larger, yeah, right.
you know, the
Especially
residential, then they can be whatever, but obviously, I don't think you want to put commercial right back on Page Road. I don't believe that's fly, but you gotta transition it in there, so mixed use is what I thought the motion was.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, if we do agree to recommend UDD, that's what you would be recommending for this area?
That area, yes, but if we do want to put the caveat of balanced commercial.
It says that in what you wrote.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't say percentages, but it says mixed.
Right.
So, I mean, maybe the word balanced is missing.
Well, I think in this one, because
We could work through that.
right.
I mean, semantics.
Just for this one, I would say, I would, you know, to move this forward, I would just say we're looking, and for balance.
Could we look at the map one more time, just to?
Yeah.
I mean, about half of it is gateway business. So we go from
Correct.
gateway business to UDD, is what I'm hearing,
Right.
which would be a mix of, is that wrong, Chris?
Oh, I was thinking that.
Oh, I thought you were shaking your head down.
I don't think you take the, well, I'll let y'all speak.
So it would be, the gateway would become mixed, but it would be mixed across potentially the whole UDD area. So depending on how many parcels you control with the master plan development, we're not saying you have to control every parcel within this area. We're saying within whatever you control, you have to do a balanced mix.
100% spot on.
Right. So
What are you saying about that large area? There's
So I-
that bone line that comes down there.
I was going to say, regarding the gateway business portion, I don't see where that we lose much, because that was not included in our calculations for the commercial tax base that we did initially
We
and
did.
already voted on. That's
So
not part of
The
it. So
gateway
we
business
have,
is everything left of that
yes, sir.
whole line.
So we have all that, we have lots of gateway business. So if this was UDD instead of gateway business, I think that makes sense. But really, you could look at this in three pieces. There's the existing gateway business portion on the future land use plan. There's the portion outside of that that's within the water and sewer service district. And then there's a portion that's outside of that. So there's really, and again, this is what, for now, I would say no, but maybe, depending on what we do with those three pieces of this. I haven't really heard a clear argument for why we would expand the service district, other than just that it could be serviced by water and sewer.
So Don, are you saying that within what's currently designated gateway business,
Could be.
you're thinking at a balance of that would be mixed use with a potential balance of residential versus commercial?
I mean, it creates a decent sized piece of land that, goes from commercial to mixed. I don't see that as big of a stretch.
I have an answer to your question though, for those 3-4 parcels, like why could they or should they become part of the UDD? Because you've got the gateway already zoned. For economic, for industrial, and then those 3 residential lots on the right side. So that's already targeted for an industrial use. So by including those parcels to the north of it, regardless of in or out of a sewer service district, by putting it into the UDD, you're giving planning, staff, and the board the ability to control the transition that I talked about earlier. That's the sole reason in my head why it made sense to me was we've got those established homes on the north side of Page Road. Let's give the controls where the controls need to be to define how that transition happens of residential.
But you're giving them that control within the existing gateway business, because the commercial, as you said, would be the frontage
Yeah.
next to the dentist office, the eye doctor's office.
Yes, next to eye doctor.
And then behind it is where you would see the mix. You would see the residential on Page Road. Is essentially the way we would expect that to go.
You're saying transition as you get closer to Page Road, it's bigger lots.
As you get closer to Page Road and as you kind of go east northeast, those pieces that he's pointing at, again, the beauty in my head at least is that you've got the larger parcels to the east over there. You've got these parcels that could become part of the UDD that then allow us to say, okay, we've got industrial growth, we've got commercial growth, we'll have a mix of residential size lot growth, but over as we start to increase the size of the lots around us, we have the ability to control through the zoning process that those pieces, those 4 pieces, will then be able to reflect.
Well, you have that regardless
create a
of where you
good
draw the
transition.
line, because it's all UDD.
And-
You have that regardless.
And just putting this on the map doesn't mean it's ever going to happen.
That's true. It's just, I agree.
Because, I mean,
So a map, so within the service district, if you took the parcels that are within the service district that don't have frontage on Route 60. And that's that swath that Chris is talking about there that abuts the R2 to the north, together with the four parcels that are currently just A10 within the district. So leaving the UDD recommendation, confining that to the set of parcels that only at the top tier are not fronting on Route 60, still within the service district. Is this a suggestion?
I think we still have a motion.
Yeah, we
were
Well, we vote on the, so the motion right now
We're
for
in
the whole
discussion.
issue, 175.
Yeah, I
We
guess the
can vote
motion,
on that
I
if
think
you
the
want.
motion was to bring in the UDD, and I think I just sort of had a friendly suggestion that it be balanced between the commercial and the residential elements. And I think, as Chris Bradbury pointed out, I think naturally that would lend to the eastern part of the master plan having less density, more like across the street.
So I need to amend the motion?
I don't think
Well, we can vote on the motion.
I mean, if you want to add the word balance, I think maybe that would make Jamie feel a little more comfortable. That's the way I heard, but maybe.
I would support adding that, the word balance to the UDD for that area.
Yeah, I mean, for me, to pull me into this, I don't know about Don and Jamie, neither here, but I mean, to make the character of the balance defined a little better in terms of what you do with the map, so that it was that set of parcels there that are on the north side and don't have frontage on 60 and still within the service district. You know, for me, I'm open to talk more about that or to consider that, you know, as an alternative. I mean, if you're just going to go with the original 175 and just say balance without any further specificity regarding how you draw the map, then there's no way I'm supporting that. I don't know about the other ones.
Yeah, I mean, I would stay within the gateway business. We have plenty of gateway business on the future land use plan, so a small UDD addition here would create a unique development opportunity.
So you're saying allow UDDs to go in the gateway business
Yes.
or replace them?
On the future land use map, define UDD in substitution or replacement for the area that's shown as gateway business.
The
So
whole
it would
gateway
become
business area? including on
The
Route 60?
entire, or
No,
this?
just this one.
Okay.
the
You have
50
me,
acres.
have me breathe.
I was
You
like-
here and
I was like-
you're talking about all the gateway?
I thought-
You're talking
Yeah,
about this
here's,
piece?
for me, I'm looking at this.
I thought you meant
Okay.
what you guys said.
Not an overspend.
Don, I was ready to go with you and have one.
I'm looking at it as three areas, and for me, you know, we have plenty of gateway business on the future land use plans.
So you're talking about taking that gateway out,
And
making
making
that
that-
UDD and not including any of the other 175?
It creates a unique housing opportunity within what was previously gateway business, so I think that's a reasonable approach. There are 4 or 5 A10 parcels within the service district too, that's the middle piece. And then there's the expansion of the service district, so there's 3 pieces.
Right.
So on this parcel, you're okay with that, okay? I thought you were talking about that whole county.
No, I think,
Understood.
yeah.
But but just to be clear, you're talking about, within that 175, you're talking about what is currently gateway business.
About 50 acres, give or take.
Yeah, it's a little more than that, I think.
Would you,
But that, with no further
Unless we're
restrictions
losing
other than,
something, but
other than,
not, you know, yeah, I mean, part of what we're doing is we're making recommendations to the citizens working group for the future land use plan. I don't think we're losing anything by losing those gateway business parcels. I mean, I know that intersection, I know it's heavily trafficked, that mix might work for internal circulation. Makes sense.
Why would you not include, and I just want to hear your thought pattern, the 4 parcels that are already within the service district?
Yeah, I think I could potentially be convinced to do that.
Okay.
I'm a little concerned about going further up Page Road, because I
Right.
think you start getting into adjacent residential that you know, maybe what we're doing is too big a reach, but I mean, creating a UDD opportunity here, you've identified it, everybody said it was good work to find that opportunity. It's just a matter of how big it is, if we can have that discussion before we vote.
So my question is, if you did that and kept it within the current service district area, does the 4 parcels that are outside of that still lend itself to the transition? Like, if somebody comes in and tries to plan that whole thing together, are they gonna be allowed to use that area that's not in there as part of their
So
transition?
it wouldn't be UDD.
Under
but when we were writing UDD, you could do up to 50% outside of the growth.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about these up here.
Oh, those.
I'm saying, to me, if you're gonna do this, why would you not
Put the map back up, please.
at all?
I mean, the UDD by definition, and based on the draft language Ligon provided, could go outside of the growth area.
Right.
So if the growth area is the yellow line,
Uh-huh.
you'd be permitted in your master planning to go outside of it. I said 20%, Ligon said 50%, but that would, you know, without designating that as UDD, you
And
could,
allow for that
you
transition?
could allow for it.
That was my exact
I don't
question.
believe it's a transition. I believe that's an area that should be kept A10 outside of the district boundary, just because that's taking on a whole nother level of
Well, I mean, maybe,
change.
So I'll just put the thought pattern in there. When you say A10, you've now developed from Carter Page Road to an area left, literally, you're at that point now gonna have a circle of A10, or square if you wanna call it that, and then back to residential. Like what would be, to me, it is the place to put the transition. That will be larger lots, but to have it in the the UDD and architectural things and all that be included, the controls would be important.
But the UDD doesn't call for large lots. It calls for a mixed use and a balance.
Right.
It calls for no more than 6 dwelling units per acre, which to me, you know, that's another potential.
It doesn't force the transition, so.
I think what happens there is you get into the fact that the planning staff, having way more education than I have about this, would recognize the same thing I recognize, the necessity of that transition. I mean,
you could,
I'm not meant to offend the planning staff. We've not had good success at that happening.
but we've had
I
some good
agree with your
successes.
statement. And we
No,
have not had good success at that happening.
You're not speaking when you were on the planning staff. I'm just kidding.
Right.
That was all aces.
No, it was not. I got shot at.
so I
I
mean,
mean, you're making an argument for the whole 175 acres, because that's what you got, right?
Yeah.
It's 165 acres. You're making an argument that this is all designated in this UDD characteristic, this UDD, zoning category, and all, kind of mixed use balance, without any further definition on that. There's really not a hell of a lot of control to keep this from just being put forward as a lot of housing, maybe 70% housing, and the whole damn thing. I mean, what, I don't, what, I
Well,
get it.
that's where you and I would argue about what balance is, because 70% is not balanced in any scale that I've ever
Tell me
used.
how it would get applied in the application.
Exactly. That's what I just expressed my feeling. But what I was saying was expand it to this and then leave this out to be that part that they can reach out and transition into if they come in with a total development plan. If-
But I
if
think,
they
could
come in-
that, wouldn't that recommendation,
Put that in the land use, you put that in the land use plan?
Correct.
wouldn't that recommendation only be to allow this to be designated as UDD? The planning commission and the board will be the ones who ultimately put the controls on that piece.
I mean, I think it would be natural to say this is
I
going to be
mean,
less.
our recommendation would say, would say, we fully expect that there'll be some controls put on it to include what Don was reading us here, and maybe more, and I would think 70-30 is not bad,
And so if you leave those out, they basically stay within the service.
That's right.
So,
This is what he called kind of phase 2, phase 1 into phase 2.
Yeah, I think it's
okay,
worth
so
something.
UDD is a proposed zoning code.
Yes.
It's not a land use designation.
That's right.
So the question arises in drawing the land use map. I mean, we can make recommendations on, say the zoning category, this applicability. But in terms of what you do on the land use map, how does the land use map going to reflect this change?
That was my original question,
Yeah.
is UDD gonna control
I
this?
mean-
Because that I can support.
Yeah, I mean-
But if it's not gonna control it and somebody could come in and turn this all into Westchester apartments, I can't support it.
Right, I mean, my idea is that, this kind of I don't know, kind of a special district, this area we're looking at, I would simply call it a future land use. That would be a future land use category to be changed in the comprehensive plan. That a future UDD, I mean, that's simple, just say this area we see as a future UDD, added it'd be the only area that is, specifically designated for that. That's the way I would see that working
I'm
out.
going to write.
You comfortable with that?
So UDD,
In theory, yes.
so UDD becomes at once a land use category and a zoning designation.
First time in Powhatan's history there's been alignment.
To me, it's smart.
Hey, all those years, been 20 years plus, never got it first time in.
Is that what we're proposing?
Yeah, I mean, I think
That's
that's,
not the current motion, but motions can be friendly amended.
I mean, I'll,
Or you could just withdraw the motion, make it.
Well, I don't think
whatever you
it's,
need to do, but
we're talking about making it a land use designation and a zoning designation, details to be worked out by others. That's what I hear.
that's the way I feel it, is that we're not, I don't think we should, and I said it last week, we need to get into that level of detail.
We've already lost.
That's, I mean, that's his job, the planning commission's job, the board's job, and then as citizens that sit on a CWG, we should be listening and we still get a chance to go speak. If it's going off the rails, then we have every right to come back and say, hey, I thought blah, 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 blah. My 2 cents is this, and they can either listen to us or tell us, no pound sand.
but I mean, if you want to be effective with this, if we decide to do it, if you want to be effective with this, I mean, there's a lot more help here for everybody concerned if you say, we're suggesting this designation for future land use, clearly directly in our charge. And, we're suggesting this, and just like we've already suggested one brand new land use category in the economic priority.
That's a good point. We're not doing zoning.
So-
if it can be a future land use designation, then maybe that's a friendly amendment to
Yeah.
call it a future land use designation.
I mean, I think that's it, and maybe that's not, I don't know if that's the word you want to, maybe that's the phrase you want for it. But I think that's really a little closer where the charge is, and I think that's what's most helpful for everybody doing the planning and for the board and for, applications, to treat them the same way you would, what I'm saying? You would treat applications in all the other existing land use districts. So,
If you don't have mixed anywhere, we have economic opportunity maybe is mixed. Is that a future land use designation? I believe.
no, well, future economic opportunity does not have housing.
It does not have housing. Economic
But just not to get too in the weeds, but you could do
I thought it did.
well, there's basically not any economic opportunity left, is there?
yeah, I mean,
I think economic opportunity is the only.
but the UDE is flexible if you wanted to.
I thought it was like that one up.
I don't believe it is, yeah, I don't.
You're saying it's not zoning, it's a land use designation.
Economic opportunity is a land use destination. Right.
Economic opportunity which we create, I shouldn't say we create.
It's on the plan. Yeah.
But that was basically de facto, right? There's not much of anything left of the map.
What's that for?
It's economic opportunity. I'm not talking about economic priority.
We try.
Oh, priority, yeah, oh, yeah.
Oh, no.
Call it.
No. Economic priority is different.
That's the new one
That's
that
the
we
new
just came up
That's
with.
the new,
Right.
we're talking about economic opportunity.
That does not include housing. This is the old economic opportunity that was already out there.
Correct.
Does
Does.
include
That's what
a ability to have some kind of mixed use, residential and
So maybe
Oh, you
you
got
could use looked at versus just a way to create a zoning, a land use that permits.
So are we against calling it a UDD
No,
Well, but wait a minute. So
land
you're-
use designation and then the details be worked out in zoning?
well, I'm saying it may fall under economic opportunity. That's what I'm suggesting.
Well, I mean, if economic opportunity covers this, then it's not clear to me why you wouldn't want to just put it in there.
Yeah, look at our economic opportunity. I mean, the UDD is just meant to be a flexible, if you were master planning an industrial development, I mean, you could use it. I mean,
There's a guy.
Sorry, I was lost in thinking that through.
The goal would be to avoid creating a future land use designation if economic opportunity could be amended to address it. We don't have a lot of that like on the future land use plan. But we didn't decide to remove it either, so.
I mean, to say that it's economic opportunity and that in our judgment, you know, a UDD, it's a new zoning category, or, you know, a complicated zoning category is what might reasonably be applied in our judgment to this area, right? I mean, that's a helpful thing. You know what I'm saying? That kind of makes things
We
pretty,
don't have that right
keeps the
now.
process, no, we don't have it right now. But there's nothing to stop us there's nothing to stop us from making a recommendation supporting UDD as a zoning category. In fact, we've already talked about this.
Looking for housing options, convenience to jobs, services, and yeah. I mean,
Economic opportunity highlights areas where there are opportunities to create large cohesive master plan developments that incorporate commercial and light industrial uses with complementary residential uses.
Yep.
These are included contiguous parcels close to, major highways, utilities, and other infrastructure, making them suitable for projects that could support regional employers and major business. Land use is intended to be flexible, encouraging innovative design. High-quality architectural features, landscape lighting, etc., part of a cohesive master plan community, incorporates environmental-friendly design techniques, provides parks and open space to residents, workers, and visitors, accommodates motorists, pedestrians, cyclists, park, and walkers. Do the same thing.
Well, you know, one nice thing about the economic opportunity, besides the fact it already exists, is that in its name, it has economic opportunity, meaning that whatever you put in there, it would be certainly anticipated that it had economic impact.
Oh, that's good, yeah.
so a little add on to that would kind of maybe I would sort of add on to the economic opportunity that this would be appropriate for the UDD zoning.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a matter of just, in the comp plan updates, just referring to the UDD zoning in the economic opportunity portion of the future land use plan right up. So that would tie it to the existing comp plan, UDD. And then the UDD zoning could be done later, because that's not part of our charge.
The only thing under economic opportunity is the acreage limit or recommendation.
This is 75 to 100
Billy
acres.
pointed out. So that's an inconsistency we would have to resolve in economic opportunity, and with only, are there still 2 economic opportunity designations on the map?
We could revisit that.
Most
but
of
there's not-
everything that was existing on Route 60 East was swallowed up by the data center.
We could look at that though.
Yes,
that was
right
all
now this track was EO, and that's gone now.
Right.
So does that mean there's only one other designated area that's
There
EO?
might be a tiny little sliver
on the
of there in the 7-Eleven area.
And he's right, Bob's right, I think.
Say again, I'm sorry.
7-Eleven.
70.
Well, there's a tiny little piece up there at 7-Eleven, not much.
It's got to be 50 to 75.
But that was a big chunk of the data center, but that basically swallowed that.
So then what that then does say with since we don't have an abundance of EO designated land, that we can modify the acreage statement in here so that this will work.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't, and clearly by having economic opportunity as the name, it means there's gonna have to be sensitivity in the way that you develop this as a true mixed parcel. And coming in here with a statement that, oh, here's a plan that's gonna develop, a whole lot of residential, and that's all that's going on here, or, you see what I'm saying here? That's clearly inconsistent with what you meant by economic opportunity by any stretch of the imagination.
So I
It
have.
helps that, right?
Yes.
That balance.
And so I have one question after that, and then I'd love to make a redirect. But, so, with the 50% under the UDD, or balanced, whatever route we're going, the 4 parcels that are on the east of the service line. In my thinking, in order to be able to have it conform with comprehensive plan, so if someone was to take and assemble everything up to the service line, service boundary, and then say they did get Larry's first piece over there, that's outside, if that's not in the comp plan as EO, then that creates an inconsistency when you go to the zoning for UDD. So,
Except for the fact that he's got it where you can expand the UDD by a certain amount.
but I'm going to go back to an argument that sank another zoning case, which is comp plan
It wasn't in there.
compliance.
Right.
So if someone wanted to grab one parcel, even if it was 18% more, not 50%, and it's not got the EO blanket over it, then that's going to be a potential rift from a zoning perspective that we could address right now. Now, it then does become purview of planning and planning commission and board if someone tries to grab all of those parcels. If they're a miracle worker and can assemble that whole acreage and 50% of it is outside the service area and they're grabbing it and it's got the EO over it, doesn't mean that planning still can't come back and say it's not happening, or you're putting 10-acre lots on this, whatever.
Right.
It's just that you have the ability to have the conversation at that point if you make the whole thing EO. It doesn't mean it has to happen. It means that it recognizes that it could.
I mean, I believe in
A little bit.
Ellis property, that was EO, and they had a mixed use, that was,
Right.
Approve it,
Exactly.
But
No,
what
no.
we didn't have was UDD zone.
Right.
So
But
I think
I
that's.
kind of like Don, Don said he thought those parcels outside of it, they're better off to stay the intended distance. I don't think we need to, we can walk before we run here. There's gonna be another comp plan revision here, it's coming down the line before you got the, there's a lot to work with already. If you take everything that's in the gateway together with that A10 that's on that eastern side of the gateway, that's the majority of the parcel. There's a lot to work with there. And if they come to 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road, if you're seeing some press there and they want to extend it, another one of those pieces, both of those pieces, deal with at that point when they've seen what this is generating. That makes good sense.
They could come back with a request for a comp plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Or if they get staff recommendation and approval through the board and the planning commission, they can use UDD as a.
that's right, it could wipe it out.
It could work for them, it
But
just depends what they're doing.
in the case he's talking about, you presumably, because of the history of what's going on here, right? Just thinking ahead. You said, all right, this is the kind of development that we've seen within this area that would definitely be an opportunity. And given that, it makes sense to us, the planning staff said it made sense to us to add these additional parcels into the picture. Well, now, the recommendation to change the comprehensive future land use map is coming out of planning. It's not coming from the applicant. When it came from the applicant, as Ligon, so rightly said at the time, it's kind of like the first time I remember when we've actually had one of these things, the applicant wanted to change it in future land use map. Okay, but in this case, you're fine. You're back in the planning in place. The planning staff's got the rationale associated. I'm pretty comfortable with that.
So the two issues with EO are, one is
The acreage.
acreage, and the other is referencing UDD. If we make a recommendation and the board accepts it for UDD's zoning,
Which could really just be, because it says unified master plan,
Yeah.
we would just change those words to
Literally.
UDD. I mean, that one's pretty
It's-
easy
It's
in my
about
mind.
that simple.
Yeah.
The acreage, I don't know what the right number is, or if we even need to come up with that. That's a pretty.
So here's, I'll throw it out, let's start somewhere. So first thing would be, we have to make action on the first motion.
Right.
Yes.
So if we're going to bring forward a different motion, because we've refined this a little,
Are you calling for the question?
I am calling for the question.
All right,
Can
all in
we
favor?
restate the motion?
The motion was to exactly what Ligon
Ligon
presented, as the entire 175 acres being put into some kind of growth area.
So that was the
All
motion.
in favor?
The second,
Second was,
yep, so all in
all
favor.
in favor?
I'll say aye, because I'm still okay with that.
All opposed? Aye. Right, so it dies because it was even. So
Correct.
do we have another
So
substitute?
could I
motion?
make a substitute, or a second motion? A motion that we designate the area inside the service boundary to EO with the amendments to EO in the comprehensive plan to remove the acreage requirement and to revise the required master plan to be required UDD zoning.
I'll second that.
So just so I have clarity, so you're using the acreage inside
Inside the service area boundary,
but you allow for if the UDD,
the UDD will do its own thing down the road.
so that could
It could grab it.
facilitate a transaction.
And if the flavor changes at the time, then
Yeah.
Bob's right.
But the comp plan will specifically mention UDD. It'll say economic opportunity with a master plan, essentially.
Well,
Economic
Keep in mind-
opportunity with UDD zoning, because that then gives planning the ability to implement, so
Here's
some
here's
better
the rezoning
standards.
application for UDD.
Yeah,
Here's the master plan that goes with it, and then
Yeah.
the ball's in your court to make sure it's balanced, it's commercial and residential, the commercial's in the right place, the residential's in the right place, it mitigates impacts on environmental features and other, so on and so forth, which is the next thing in the
well,
package.
I'm gonna suggest on that motion, that you separate the two things a little bit. That you say, okay, put your land use designation for that area that you're describing as economic opportunity.
Yep.
And then a second portion, right, in the recommendation is that we put forward the recommendation that this entire area, we fall under a new zoning classification of UDD, okay? Now, the reason I'm doing to separate this is because it is entirely possible that they could go with economic opportunity, but not yet be ready to sign off on a new zoning category, UDD, depending on how it's put together, how it's worded, what it replaces, right? There's a lot of machinations that have to be done.
We're
I mean,
talking about-
we're basically in favor of,
We're talking about
consolidation.
creating a UDD zoning classification, recommending that. We are not talking about changing the zoning of these parcels.
oh, no, no, no.
They will still
never
have
talk
to
about that.
apply
Never talk
for,
about that.
correct.
we're just talking
Gotta go through the
about,
process.
Yep.
we're just adding a reference in the comp plan to UDD.
But I think in terms of our recommendation, adding that reference as a second thing beyond economic opportunity makes a lot of sense. We don't want, because if they don't like the UDD, then it's like our whole recommendation is, you know what I'm saying?
Well, it's two recommendations.
Yeah, I mean, we're in favor of both of them, and especially if they come out with a wide support for both of them over the committee. I think you're probably okay.
Still okay with the way I made the motion. I've been thinking about it for half an hour.
And
I don't think it's significantly different though, Bob.
I know,
the reason I don't is because it says already in economic, unified master plan.
Exactly.
So really all we're talking about is changing the title of that unified master plan from the 14, well, it's 8 of them that we have now to one designation, and that's the only one that's gonna fit there because it's the only one that's gonna be in the
Yep.
comp plan. It's already there. We're not
Get rid
changing
of
that language. It's already there.
You're saying that if the board
All of it.
decided that they didn't like the looks of the UDD for some reason, they nevertheless could just leave that alone in the comp plan as it exists, but put it in all, within economic development.
Right,
Bingo.
I get that.
that's where I'm at.
I hear you.
There's also a world, there's also a world that within EO, it could be no residential.
Right, yeah, they could.
That's the
don't have to
beauty
put
of
it
what
in
it
there.
is right now.
They don't have to put it in there,
Mastermind.
right?
So,
I understand that.
That's the motion.
Everybody clear on the motion?
As
yes.
presented.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0.
6.
6-0, excuse me.
Good work.
I forgot about myself. I was counting all the others. I was like, oh, wait.
So, real quick, in a few minutes left, I think on the UDD, I think we probably agree if you want to master plan a commercial development, a gateway business development, that, sure. If you want to master plan a light industrial development, UDD, that's great, you can do that. I guess the one question that was still kind of left over was, is in a gateway business, is there any flexibility for residential? Even if you said 10%, 20%, I don't know. Is that a question?
Well, I mean, this is, okay,
We're on the next
gateway
topic.
business.
He's on the next topic.
We are on the next.
He's on the
Next time, next time.
About gateway business in general, are we willing to let UDDs be proposed in gateway business?
Yeah, I mean,
Just, can I say one thing before we get started?
Yeah, and I have a question.
I'll sit here and listen. I'm not gonna say a word one way or the other. Not because of I had any financial tie with anything, but I did have a piece that was a gateway business that I rezoned for Jack May's family. And it's still getting gateway. I don't wanna say a word whether residents goes there or doesn't go there, one way or the other. So I feel like it wouldn't be fair to anybody.
So
And I wouldn't look in the mirror in the morning and know that I appreciate that.
I appreciate it.
So I can listen.
I reviewed Liggins, the specific language of what he provided to us, so I have a question on page 6. It says UDD would be available only through a zoning map amendment and applicable only in areas designated as future growth areas in the comprehensive plan. That's my question. What is the future growth areas in the comprehensive plan for Powhatan County? I thought that would be a good place to start, just to make sure we're all on the same page.
Well, I mean, you just listed future land use designation, including economic opportunity. in that group.
Yep.
So that's it. That's it.
those lines, like, we expanded the one out here.
The yellow line.
Right.
All those lines.
All right, so it's the village, it's defined, and then it's the area in the eastern part of the
I'm
county.
using the red line.
So those two areas. All right.
I mean,
And,
that's just, a future, to call it a future growth area, that's just kind of a composite label applied to different set of land uses. You know what I'm saying, that have their own characteristics.
So if you're within one of the two future growth areas and the board decides to adopt UDD, you could apply for rezoning anywhere within the future growth area, regardless of the underlying land use plan.
right, and you could do that exclusively commercial and gateway business. You can do it, you could apply a master plan exclusive for industrial and future industrial or economic priority. You could master plan. I guess the question is in the gateway business, would any residential be appropriate in gateway business under UD?
Yeah, I mean, my concern is that we've taken the effort to create gateway business and economic priority land uses for that reason, to try to get a better commercial tax split, not just to do the entire future growth area. It seems like that really opens the door to quite a bit of departure from what we were trying to accomplish.
And this might be an easy question, but I think I do get nodded when I say master plan commercial development, hey, that's okay. You understand that?
So to my eye, what I'd prefer to see would be within those two areas, have the citizens working group roll their sleeves up and look at the future land use plan within the two future growth areas and see where it may or may not apply, because I think economic opportunity could be applied to other parcels within those two areas, and then if that was tied to UDD, that would manage the opportunities for mixed-use development. It would send, if there's 10 parcels within the future growth area, for example. Like,
See, I thought it was an easy no. You're going down a path to create some yes.
I just don't know where the gaps are. I don't think economic priority or gateway business is what we want to lose out of the future growth areas. I could be wrong, but that's.
Yeah, I'm just asking the question, so I'm leaving the gateway commercial, said, sure, you can master plan commercial development, of course, but, the
I mean,
answer.
I think the whole, to me,
Right.
the creation of the UDD itself as a zoning category, and applicable, and economic opportunity. The plan you got it for this gateway business area, together with the adjacent A10s, to go along that line together with the, whatever the hell we got here, 250 to 270 acres that we got over there in the village area. Those are big steps forward.
Yeah, no,
And I don't, trying to push
And
it
you're talking
somewhere.
about 2,000 plus other acres.
So,
I don't want to, I'm not comfortable pushing that discussion further.
so it may not be the gateway business area, but what about the village area?
Can we pull up the land use map to see it?
Yeah. Village area, I give you the
Village area, we're good.
With the UDD?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
yes.
Yeah. Oh,
Yes.
I think
We're
talking about the
We're talking about all the other gateway
No,
businesses.
I got that, but
/
sorry, I wanted to make sure that was clear. Okay.
Yes, sir.
I think we agreed with that.
okay. Well, I think that's,
I have one other question though, before we kick that can down the road. I'm just gonna ask it because it occurred to me. So, if we have an aggregated project, and I'll throw out a couple different ones. So if we've got a gateway business project and it's 10 acres, someone wanted to come through and add some residential to it, I could see the hesitation. If we've got, and I don't know what the line would be though either, but if we've got a 25 or a 50 acre project that someone wants to bring UDD and have a component of residential in that, here's the scenario I can see in my head when you look at the way that the gateway businesses are sitting on there, is that regardless on where we argue and may or may not end up on how far off 60 is far enough off for residential, there could be, in these gateway business areas, there are definitely, I mean, you look at how far off 60 some of this is, we can safely say it's going to be outside of our argument zone, whether it's 200 feet, 500 feet, or 1,000 feet. Does that lend us some degree of flexibility in saying that in gateway business, I don't know how to formulate it, and maybe we do take it to the bigger group, but I'm trying to put the nugget in the head that, is there something there that we can go with that still does give a little bit of room for it to be considered, but doesn't open the floodgates?
Well, that's why he wants to open the map and go parcel by parcel and do that.
He's saying that.
You're looking at it at
He's saying
a
it
broad
another
brush.
time.
I am.
He's saying pull the map up. Let's
So
go
I'm
through it.
talking about just doing a gap analysis of land uses within the future development.
I mean,
Just looking for parcels that aren't clearly defined in the future land use plan.
I mean,
well, we'll say,
pretty skeptical, but.
Yeah.
If you take the last argument that Chris just made, and we just been quick, how far off is 60? I think how far off is 60 is a key factor.
Chicken and
I'm
the egg
looking,
question.
huh?
Chicken
It's
and
a-
the egg.
So, I mean, as I look in there, I see the area wedged in between the economic priority, the big economic priority area and Holly Hills. And there is it goes a little deeper off of 60 in that area. Now, whether the back end of that, those that are well off of 60, the back end of that might fit into the economic opportunity area. See what I'm saying here? Maybe. But I'm not real comfortable pushing this discussion here
Okay, I put the nugget out there.
I understand.
The nugget's in your head.
But that is an argument, what Don's talking, to look a little more closely at where you're exactly talking.
Right, if it is a parcel by
Plus, there's
parcel
a brush
analysis.
thing here, that, yeah.
And just to be clear, where it says only an area
No.
designated as
Gateway
future growth
business
areas.
is 190 something.
I wouldn't agree with
Looking
that. I don't think we should be
Going
doing
up
that.
Where is this? Where is it?
Page 6.
Oh, no, I totally agree, right.
It says UDD would be available only through a zoning map and applicable only in areas designated as future growth areas in the comprehensive plan. I think that's too broad. That was where I was starting from. But
Right.
I am open to a gap analysis of the future growth area. I mean, if we don't, I mean, is A10 supposed to be in the future growth area? How many parcels are not either developed already or intended for gateway business or economic opportunity or economic priority? I don't think there's a lot of other land within those future growth areas, but I don't know without taking the time to look at it. And I don't know if that was what was intended, is to reopen gateway business. I know you said you could do a UDD for commercial.
Right.
So, but it opens the door to residential, which is the hard part.
Well, I'm sorry, I wasn't going to say,
That's all I,
I'm about to take.
oh,
That's right.
There's not, I mean, there's very little A10 that is, kind of within 2,000 feet either side of 60 in the entire eastern portion of the county. It still is A10.
so the other
Going
extreme
outside
swing would
the
be
gateway,
just the,
outside of gateway business. Plenty of stuff's a gateway business, is A10 for that, lots. But, talk about stuff that's not already a gateway business or not, in the economic priority areas. It's a pretty limited amount of it. And
so the other extreme swing would be back to where UDD zoning is really only intended for economic opportunity on the future land use plan. And so if it goes from here to here, I'm just saying, pull it back a little, like look for other like areas within the future growth area that may be good for economic opportunity on the future land use plan. I'm not sure there are any.
right, I mean, you're not restricting it to economic opportunity, though. I mean, you got the entire village special area plan, which we're calling about expanding now.
That's an
Well, it's not
interesting
doubling the
concept.
size of it.
I mean, I would not say that UDD should be done in the entire future growth area the way it's written in currently in this package, because it opens it up to quite a bit more residential. And the goal of economic priority, which we worked through in pretty good detail, is to create light industrial businesses, jobs. So,
Yeah, I think that the way I would interpret it now is that in unified plan is okay. I don't repeat myself, but we're not recommending any residential in that. Fine to do the UDD, but you would need to keep it all.
so you could do a UDD master plan, but if you include residential, it might not.
It wouldn't be compliant with comp.
In the gateway business, and same with economic priority.
Right.
I understand. So, got it. Thank you.
We can kind of come back to that, the last,
Not about gateway, but about economic priority, since we brought it up. So, no housing is allowed in economic priority, is that what you're saying?
I believe that's what the
Yeah,
group.
definitely.
That was correct.
Yeah.
Make sure.
In fact, it's pretty much restricted.
To several smaller uses.
Yeah, to, well, it's restricted economic
The
opportunity.
only reason I ask that is because
Priority, restricted I-1.
Enrico spent thousands and millions of dollars to fix their problem they had with no housing in their major industrial park / office complex, because it was losing tenants and housing was needed in there to make it sustainable.
So economic priority is tied to light industrial. Economic opportunity could potentially be tied to UDD. And I don't think it's wrong to have clear ties between zoning and land use. Like that makes things easier, I think, with your plan if it's clear. So
Yeah, I think I can run it. I think when I,
Innsbrook was that example I was giving you. It was done many years ago when it was all office and industrial and manufacturing, and then it started losing tenants, and they did a study, and the study said people want to live, work, and so they amended their plan and started putting housing in so people could, maintain their workers there and et cetera, et cetera. So that's the only reason I ask. I'm not saying, I understand that, economic priority is important to us to balance our tax rate. I just wondered
If I'm writing it up, I'm saying village, future land use designation can have UDD with a residential component, as can economic opportunity, a UDD in gateway business or industrial master plan with no residential developments or park. So that's what.
Can I ask a question? The area that we talked about at the last meeting, will that be shown on the future land use plan as village or as economic opportunity?
I was just put it as village, but say in village, the UDD is also. One last quick thing is on the cluster. I know we go, maybe stay a couple of minutes extra here. We have time to go, but on the cluster development, rural cottage, I don't know if you just want to, anybody got any general thoughts about that?
I really don't know enough about it, like, I can't, what the history of that, what the pricing ends up being and how it's, how it's put together, it's just not,
Let's step back and look
look
at
at
that.
some, but
So let's step away from that for a second and think about relative to everything we've talked about. What are the areas where cluster housing could be appropriate? And here, the high view of this is really, in terms of cluster housing, would be, the intent is more breaking apart it, well, cluster housing fits, the development right behind St. Francis right now, on St. Francis, Westchester. Okay, so its scale is out of proportion. Okay.
that's evident in large font, bold letters.
Correct.
I would even agree with you.
There are, and I agree with you, and I do that kind of work. There are pieces in there where what they have is 1-story, 2-story
They got a little,
homes
I get it.
that have no yards, or they have a courtyard, and they're ringing it. Okay, they ring a small courtyard you park behind, and the whole point of that, it goes back to old neighborhoods trying to create pocket community. So where we have Powhatan as a community, we have your subdivision, Spring Branch, as a community. You then break it down to one more level, and you create this micro community on what could be rental, could be condo, it could be
Pretty simple.
simple. It could be any kind of like financing structure to do it. But the whole point of it is that you've got effectively 0 lot lines on most of them.
Well, I had the picture of the one from Farmville.
Yep.
And share my screen here.
I mean, the people in there don't actually own their lots.
Yeah, so this is on one, these are all, I believe these are all rentals. It is on, that is probably, I don't know if that's even half an acre, maybe half an acre, maybe a little more. But here's the
Well,
street.
you could have a condo concept where you did have ownership of the dwelling, right?
You could do it as a condo.
You couldn't sell the land off independently.
Right.
So you don't have that, and you have and what goes with that, right, is a substantial maintenance time.
On the condo,
You would have an
Deal,
association.
but, that's what you get to pay into.
That's right.
Yeah, that's a much more structured thing. In some ways, potentially appealing that you, by not having to pay for the lot itself, right, if the ownership of the land starts the price point a little lower to begin with, which is not saying it can't get bid up there, but it starts it a little bit lower. Because
It encourages.
It's almost kind of, I think this
Carried
picture
away with
almost
that,
looks like the village of Powhatan,
Yeah.
This kind of looks like it could fit right in the village of Powhatan.
That's your textbook example right there.
but there's not anything, there's nothing, Chris, I think anyway, there's nothing in the language that Liggett is proposing regarding the UDDs that would preclude that.
Correct.
So,
correct.
you know,
That's
it's
right.
really.
Well, it
it's
does,
not that
it
you-
says 6 units per acre maximum.
Oh, 6 units an acre, that's
That's what
not,
it says in the living.
I mean, I don't think, I'm just thinking about, I've been into that area you're talking about over there in Westchester, driven into that little thing on the, it's more than 6 units on an acre. I mean, that's not the deal. So I'm not sure how restricted that really is.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could do the GD, but as I said, just kind of had my own personal, I believe this will be the future. I'm not saying Powhatan, but future, see more housing like this. You know, it's happening.
But it doesn't preclude that down to the level of, you know, 6 units on an acre, which a lot of people would say, my God, that's terribly high density housing.
Right.
But that doesn't preclude that possibility.
Right.
I mean, and that makes sense, and you can argue that from the standpoint of what kind of would work in Powhatan, you know, and maybe get toward the attainability a little bit. You make that argument, it's still flying. But you know, when you to go beyond that, and especially to drop the economic opportunity umbrella, right, around that, you know, I'm less clear that that's a good sell. And it sure is not a good sell. I mean, it's just not a good sell to get away from making the case by what is Powhatan itself, or what your vision is for Powhatan itself, by referencing what you've got near Westchester Commons or what you've got in Henrico, or you see what I'm saying here? There's just a lot of people that are not even beginning interested to talk about making anything. They don't want to hear it. You know, look, some of that not really all that rational. It's not maybe exactly covered. It's fun, but it's there. But I don't think we have to go with it. I think, you know, you can make the case in terms of what you're trying to achieve in Powhatan itself, you know, what the options are without going there. And, yeah, I think that's to some extent what we're involved in here today. We're trying to work out a compromise on this, right, on the one point. And I think that's true just in general about the UDD that you have. Nothing to stop that from developing, nothing at all to stop it.
So my question would be then, is maybe what we do is we look at, is 6 units per acre okay if someone was to look at a cluster development, or would it render it not feasible? And that, I don't know that that has to be a bigger group thing.
Right,
I mean,
yeah, I think maybe a bigger, I mean,
And then,
I believe it's kind of, a unit for a cluster would be
If you
fine.
go back into some of the confusing land use, you know, VCPD and all the others, the densities was something that was wrestled with a lot over the years, trying to come up with those, whether it's 4 units per acre, what, you know, we spent a lot of time trying to talk about what makes something, a project affordable, different things to do. And so it was 4 units, it was 6 units, it was 8 units, what was it? And it was a lot of dialogue by a lot of people, and citizens on that whole density thing back years ago.
Yeah, if I was writing a cluster, not to cut you off, but if I was writing a cluster ordinance, I would probably limit the number like 6. I mean, you can't, regardless of your size, you can't do more than cluster.
Whatever.
No,
Right.
in any case, isn't it
Does that
true?
work though? 6?
Wait,
It's like,
it's a 60, an average of a 60 by 120 lot roughly. I mean, spitballing, it's about 7,300
Not on
square.
ranch.
So what's
Well, yeah, but don't forget that, unless I'm wrong about this, I don't think, I mean, when you're quoting these densities, right, dwelling units, you know, so, I mean, you're quoting the density not based on the building lot itself.
No.
It's the whole deal.
because you could have
So,
open space.
all right, so now I said, you want to add a little common open space. I mean, you get down here to the Scottville area, I mean, it's not quite like the top there. But if you get down there, and the big deal is the fact that they've got in each one of those things, this little, sort of like a little park down here, you know, walking, a little green space. So once you incorporate some of that here or there, you know, it doesn't really limit you to be.
so then the
you know,
answer is 6 is a reasonable number, like Ligon said, and then it would be within a UDD, so it would, you'd have to judge.
Master plan with
So do we have to specifically have that
amenities.
language in the?
Yeah, it would be where it fits into the
Allow
overall master
cluster
plan, it
development.
might work really well, right?
Yeah, I would.
I don't think you have to.
You don't think
I think
because of the density?
But my thought is that my thought it would be like as conditional use and maybe even in agriculture.
Okay.
I mean, that's kind of my thought, you know, you could say, you can do up to 6 units in a cluster, you know.
6 units per acre on a cluster development.
Right.
Require a certain amount of open space, and all that too.
I mean,
But it's a UD master plan anyway.
well, it's going to be a conditional use permit, so, you know, you can't, and again, 6 just sort of stands out, you can't do more
Why
than
does it have
6.
to be a conditional use permit?
In agricultural. You're talking about in agricultural.
In
making-
agriculture, oh,
In agricultural,
Oh, okay.
I heard you say it, but I want to make sure I heard you say
So
it.
you're talking.
You're talking about making
agricultural
this
zoning.
an agricultural zoning CUP
Right,
as another way
Okay.
to offer diverse housing.
up to 6. You don't have to do 6, obviously.
Yeah,
You could cluster, I think it's probably, you know, would it work in ag? I think it would actually work quite well on larger parcels, but, you know, again, I show the example of a farm, well, it's right in town. It's been there for 15 years, 10 years. But, you know, it's one of these things where I think, my only criticism of that, I think the architecture could have been better. You know, that's just me. If I was doing a conditional use permit, I'd say it.
Well, I think
I mean,
in that
so-
example, it's not really part of a larger mixed-use development. It's a cluster development that was driven by the CUP. So that maybe is an
Right.
example of what we don't want. What we really would rather have is, you know, a central area that's high density, that's surrounded by lower density, like Chris described, as part of a UDD. So, you know, if what we want to do is say, well, we're open to this, you know, being considered or something, like nobody is saying, I don't think anyone's saying it's a bad idea no matter what. I think we're just saying if you're going to do it in A10 versus economic opportunity in the village, it's a completely different looking proposal. And so if we have to work through it, you know, maybe we
Well,
have to
I
look at
mean,
it.
the idea, that, you know, the idea that you would take A10 as a zoning category, which encompasses a really big portion of the county, and put in there that you might allow 6 units of it's a complete non-starter, okay, that's just out of here. That's the last thing we want to be touching, and that, you know, that would be opposed. People got to understand that that's going to be vehemently opposed.
Is that what you were trying to do?
I hope.
I mean, that's what, I mean,
But-
I don't know if it has to be 6.
But if you say, no, A10, stuff that's classified A10, but it is in the gateway, or it is in the economic opportunity area, there's plenty of that stuff that's A10 right now, but you designated that as part of the future land use plan in a manner that would, right, that's a
Back to what I said earlier, my original, this 2010, all this stuff, is not to do density in A10. It was to focus in any growth areas.
And maybe the cluster.
The only one that I supported back then was conservation subdivisions in A10 to try and preserve open space and farms and families that had had property for generations and generations that now had lost, for lack of a better word, their ability to do 5-acre average, 2-acre minimum, which was a very economic benefit to them when they sold. It was taken away. So the conservation subdivision was an attempt to try to help them be able to sell a portion and take their mama to the doctor, or if a medical emergency happened or whatever, so.
Yeah, well, you know, we had this discussion at the full committee, a beginning discussion about conservation subdivisions, came to some agreement. Came around the table, it was not a formal motion, some of it. And that remains to be, you know, formally decided upon, because we have a charge here that, you know, we need to give the planning commission recommendation that they can then take onto the board on this point. So, you know, there are a couple of things in there, you know, one that was a pretty wide agreement, I think, around the group, that it's not a good idea to allow unbuildable land to be used as part of what's supposed to be the set aside that you're giving the county in order to have this, because you can't build on it anyway. So, you know, remove that from what could be classified as part of your conserved land in the proposal. And the second was that they all need to be CUPs. there are other things you have there, like Darlene had several other suggestions about, buffers and limiting that and so on. I don't know whether we get that through the committee or not. If you got those two things through the committee as a recommendation, I think you'd be helping out the planning commission, the board a lot in terms of direction. And I think it would be healthy and good for the county. I don't,
Well,
subject to those, I don't know.
Suggest that we talk about that in the bid with the bid committee?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I don't think
Yeah,
that's something.
that was part of our like second charge that we got thrown after we'd already started.
Yeah, the board, I believe, right?
Yeah, so yes is the answer to that question. I just wanted to clarify what I thought I heard, which I was not in support of, which would be just randomly putting UDDs available out in agricultural.
Well, I've kind of called it more of a cluster. I think what I'm hearing is maybe the cluster.
But if you go conservation subdivision with, conditional use permit, that's where I would see your clustering.
Right.
I mean,
Well, I
that's,
think they're two, conservation subdivisions are allowed in A10. I was gonna say, it sounds like.
no, currently, but
Right.
we're gonna
But-
suggest they go to conditional use permit. Go ahead.
No, I know, and
Okay.
but for this specific thing, like, just so that it gets incorporated into the comp plan, maybe it fits better in economic opportunity, which is what I think you was saying.
Yeah, I think maybe that's what I'm hearing is that I go to the growth area, maybe the cluster is better if you want to just do a cluster in the economic opportunity in the growth area.
Yeah, or the growth area, or both. I'm not sure.
Or could it
I'm
just
not sure.
generally be the growth area?
Which is where I thought you were going with it, and I was in support of. But then I heard the A1 thing and it.
All right, that's fine, that's fine. I mean,
And I think they're,
Yeah, A10, never not A1.
so if we're kind of, as a group, maybe feel more comfortable with it being a cluster, and I'm kind of separating it a little bit from the UD. We're comfortable with it, would we be comfortable with it every area of the growth area, or would we be more comfortable if it was just an opportunity? Economic opportunity.
I'd just leave it alone with the economic, well, you got, it's two things right now in the growth area, right? It's economic opportunity. And it's certainly the courthouse village area. I mean,
Okay.
but two very large areas you're talking about, and it makes good sense for it to be there.
to me, we haven't put to bed the issue of the growth area versus economic opportunity versus other future land uses within those growth areas. So I think that's a little bit of a loose end. I think the conservation subdivision is still a loose end, but maybe we take this stuff on with the bigger group.
Yes.
We want to do another breakout meeting. I think we've got the nuts and bolts. My recommendation is to try to rework this so it's a little more directive. You know, this is great, but it's, you know, we've already covered some ground, so I don't know if that's something you want help with. It would be great if we could take this to the full citizens working group with a little bit of direction from this subcommittee, as opposed to just, here's the same information we debated for 8 hours.
Yeah.
Because I think that'll turn
No, I
into.
think that,
I think what I want to do now is go to the beginning and write up, as I understand, everything that we kind of checked off.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, take this template and make the
I
change.
would say, here's everything that we talked about, that I feel like we're, you know, do I have it right, do I have it wrong?
It's not just this, it's everything else.
Oh, yeah, these things, everything we've done in the past.
Family subdivision.
Economic priority.
Oh, yeah.
It's everything.
I want to add it all into, so I guess the next question is, I'll do that, is when do you want to meet next? The whole group. I mean, I guess we can plan.
Well, you're gonna have to put that, yeah, and you're gonna have to put that out to the whole group to,
And we need.
But if this group could maybe come up with a day, and then
How
at
long do
least,
you need to put it together?
I think probably at least 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
2 weeks for you to accomplish that?
Yeah, so plus one for us to.
your planning commission meeting is on the 3rd, correct?
Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe that June 9th through 13th week.
I'm going for junior firefighter camp that week, so.
I've got election, we got elections that day, all those.
Well, it'd be the following week then, not sooner, because we need, Ligon needs at least 2 weeks.
16th to the 20th.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
Thursday.
Yeah, I could do the,
This is gonna be busy.
yeah, it has to be the
16th.
17th.
No, 17, oh, that's the day
That's the
before.
day
What's
before.
wrong?
I could do the 16th, the
I got a lot of work
18th.
to do on that.
18th, for me, actually, the election.
Right now.
Election is the 16th.
How about the Sunday? How about the
So let's
Thursday?
do it then.
Tuesday,
What is
the
Thursday, Thursday,
17th.
19th?
The county's closed.
And I have to do canvas, I can do it in the
I'm
afternoon.
gonna use this building and I'll be able to.
17th?
The 17th.
About the 16th.
17th of 16th?
That's election day.
So election's on Tuesday.
On 16th? The 16th?
17th.
Oh,
It's the Democratic primary.
So we were throwing out the
Get
16th,
that big-
but you were saying the 16th is Juneteenth?
No, 19th.
19th,
He was talking
okay.
about doing the day
so
after.
Monday, the 16th?
Doug, can you do the 16th?
That works for me.
16.
Monday,
Yeah.
the 16th?
This would be for the full group, but we get to decide what we're proposing.
That's
We're gonna take the lead on it.
I want to bring everything
I
we've
wish- I
done.
really want, the 17th, Jim, you did a good job.
Say again, Rob?
16th. Well, there's nothing I'm gonna do on the 17th that's not gonna fix something on the 18th.
So what time, you want to do it 3 to 5 or?
The 16th is what they're looking at. Monday.
I can do any
16th,
time
yeah,
after
I'm
3.
okay. I'm all right.
I mean,
16th,
I'm good any way you look at it.
I would.
I'm
suggest-
okay. I've got to set up stuff that day, but we'll be done by 2 o'clock, so.
I would suggest we put 3 hours on people's calendars, just because it's a lot. It's everything, and it may need to be continued, but we should ask for 3 hours. If everybody's okay with that.
Just FYI, my goal is to have the final report at the 28th of July to the board.
Okay, so you left yourself room too, which is, okay, good.
16 won't work for me, but don't, but that's,
Oh,
so that was,
Will the 19th work for you?
what?
The 19th?
No,
County's
no,
not
go
open
ahead,
on
the
19th.
19th, I think. it was.
June 19th.
But, no,
This is Juneteenth.
It's Juneteenth. It's
When
now a
did
national
the county
holiday.
decide to observe the Juneteenth?
That's a national thing.
That's a national holiday.
Yeah.
All right. For sure. Old school blinkers.
We're close to the university.
My old
They-
school
they-
blinkers, I'm not careful.
They took
Okay.
two of
Is that too far out?
two of the
Say
January
again?
holidays.
23rd, is that too far out?
The election day went away, and then
oh,
23rd is
All right.
I'm not around.
the BOS meeting.
Yeah, I don't want to do that week,
You don't want to do the week at all? Okay.
23rd. I mean, I could do Thursday or Friday if you wanted to look later in the week. I'm sorry. I mean,
Would be pushing, if we did like the 12th? June 12th?
I'm gone.
You're going, okay.
Yeah, that whole week I
That's
got
right, you
junior
got
firefighter.
fire, okay. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Sounds about
Could you keep
16th.
Yeah.
Well,
The 12 won't work for me.
So
Okay.
that's 1, 2.
16th, 17th?
That's back to the same
17th
thing.
is not.
16th didn't work, 17th.
I could do the 18th in the afternoon. We have election canvas that morning at 9 o'clock, but it ain't gonna be, it won't be long. At 1 o'clock we'll be finished.
I'm 18th works for
Full
me.
day.
18th?
AFD in the
So
morning.
would be
I
done,
can do
right?
the
Yeah, we'll be done by 1 o'clock.
Dad, can you do that?
And then like a 6 o'clock meeting?
I'm good on the 18th, I think.
18, 3 to 6?
I would,
No, wait. 6, how about 6 to 9?
you're gonna, I think you might
I
get
mean, we
some.
got this lunch and learn thing.
I can do 6.
How about 5 to 8?
I think
We
5
compromise
days,
5 to 8, 6 to 9 pushes some people, especially people old, like, you know,
like me.
I know, you're not old, Bob.
I would suggest 5 to 8.
Earlier would suit me a little better, but I'll.
5
Yeah, all right, 5 to 8, 5 to 8. You good for 5 to 8?
4 to 7, 5 to 8.
Sounds like we're there.
All right, 5 to 8 on the 18th.
5 to 8?
5 to 8.
The 8th,
What's the date?
June 18th.
June 18th, 5 to 8. It is subcommittee meeting.
No, full
That's
committee.
full commission.
Yes. CW.
So with that,
5 to 8.
would the chair entertain a motion to adjourn?
I would absolutely entertain that.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We had some
All right, good work, guys.
It's been a